Dr. Wilmer Leon, so if what you're saying is true,
And it is.
and if it is factual,
And it is.
then what this American society has been fed,
Is bullshit.
and the
Thank you, MSNBCIA. Thank you, CNN. Thank you, Rachel Maddow. Thank you, Joyanne Reed. Thank you, pick one. They're lying to you. They're lying to you.
It's evident that he cares. What do you care about? Welcome to the Rock Newman Show. It's the Rock Newman Show.
The Minister of Wellness Ministries and Rock Newman Show 2.0 return to the nation's capital Saturday, September 16th, 2023, Union Temple Baptist Church. This is your final opportunity to join us in person before the official start of the viral outbreak season. To get empowered to quickly lose weight, reverse disease so you can be 100% confident your immune system is ready for anything that may come. Come hungry, because delicious plant-based soul food and desserts will be available by DC's own Dr. Ruby Lathan. Space is extremely limited, so RSVP as soon as possible at theministerofwellness.com under Health Seminars. That's theministerofwellness.com under Health Seminars. Please call or text 888-847-8026. That's 888-847-8026.
greetings. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are again a witness to the Rock Newman Show 2.0. We do not take it lightly at all that you give us some of your time and attention. I would suggest that if you got family or friends that you care about and you want them to be enlightened and informed and maybe even a little bit entertained, that you call them and tell them right now how they can tune in to the Rock Newman Show 2.0 so y'all can talk about it afterwards. Today, I have someone at the table with me who you may well have heard of. He has a fantastic show on Sirius. I don't even know if it's still called Sirius XM.
It is.
Sirius XM radio, heard around the country and around the world. My guest today is Dr. Wilmer Leon. Lee, thank you so much for being at the table with me, brother.
Rock, thank you for the invitation. It's good to be back. The last time I was on, we were talking about the piece I wrote about the movie, The Green Book.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's good to be back.
Yes, the Green Book. Here's what I want to do for my audience, just to bring you up to speed. I want to do this in somewhat of a biographical format initially.
Okay.
I want my folks to know you, to get to know you, know who you are, where you come from. You didn't just drop out the sky and get a Ph.D. You had a journey, and I want to talk a little bit about that journey.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, let's go all the way back. Where you from? Where were you born?
Sacramento, California. June 14th, 1959.
All right.
Born in Sacramento, California. I am Wilmer Joseph Leon III, the son of Wilmer Joseph Leon Jr. and Edwina Leon. I can't say enough about my parents. I can't say enough about the community that I grew up around. in my family, education was always stressed. And brutally sometimes.
I hear you.
My dad had his master's in sociology from Berkeley, I want to say around 1948 or 1949. My mother had her MSW, her master's in social work from the University of Chicago around 1946 or 47.
Okay, which means they had to be born somewhere around
In
the
the 20s. Yes.
1920s.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they're both Southernites. Education long, deep in my family. My maternal grandfather, Dr. Ephraim Thaddeus Millage DeVore, graduated from Howard with his DDS in 1911, having gotten there in 1901. Dentist. Having gotten there in 1901 off of the DeVore plantation in Greenwood, South Carolina. He hadn't even finished high school, so he was at Howard through normal school, undergrad, grad, and dental school, and then left there and went to New Orleans, where he met my grandmother, who had graduated from Straight College, which is now Dillard University. My maternal grandfather became the first, as far as our research shows us, the first black licensed dentist in New Orleans. My father was the first, as far as I know, the first person from Donaldsonville, the first African American from Donaldsonville, Louisiana, to go to college, and he went to Southern University.
Quite a history of education.
Education.
Okay, and here, okay, and so you born in
59.
You born in 1959. Now, what is your earliest memories of your parents' plan and idea for you or for their offspring to be educated? Do you remember them start you reading early? Was it going to Sunday school? What was the beginning?
Well, the beginning was Holy Spirit Parish Catholic School, which is where I went to the first grade through the 8th grade. Private Catholic school. I was the only, past the 4th grade, I was the only African American in my class. And so I remember struggling mightily because of the racism there. And
What do you remember?
oh man, I remember fighting damn near every day in the bathroom to get out the bathroom. I remember fighting on the playground. I remember being called nigger all the time and just all kinds of things. But as a kid, you're always trying to fit in and find a space to navigate.
Yeah.
I remember.
So you're there. You're there in school. Did you attend that church?
Yes.
That parish church.
Yes. Yes. Went to Holy Spirit. I was baptized at Holy Spirit Catholic Church.
And did they have? I grew up in Southern Maryland. I went to St. Michael's church, and there was what was called Sunday school. We did it on Saturday, but it was called Sunday school.
No.
Now, was the church predominantly African American?
No,
white.
Predominantly white. I remember in 1968, October, watching the Olympics with my father. And I remember Dr. John Carlos then, Tommy Smith and Peter Norman, and the 200 meters. I remember the black gloved fists supporting the Olympic Project for Human Rights.
You were 9 years old at that point.
I was 9 years old. I remember sitting there with my father and my father saying, well, this is not going to be good for them. And I went to school the next day, and during the Pledge of Allegiance, threw up my fist, bowed my head, and got kicked out of school.
As a 9-year-old,
Got kicked out of school.
So you started good trouble, as John Lewis would say. You started good trouble early.
And I remember the principal calling that night. The phone rang. We were having dinner, and my dad answered the phone, and he did everything he could do not to laugh, but my folks stopped dinner. My dad said to my mother, "When we got to go in here and have a conversation?" And they called me into the living room and into the family room, and they said, you got to go back and apologize. And I said, apologize for what? I didn't do anything wrong. No. And they were trying to explain to me the value of education and why it was important for me to be in that school and all of these kinds of things. And I refused to apologize. And I said, if I didn't do anything wrong, then I'm not apologizing.
You had that logic as a 9-year-old.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And I told my father, you're going to have to figure this out.
Wow.
Because I'm not apologizing.
Yeah.
And so we went to school the next day, had a sit down. They worked it out, and we continued along our way. Yeah. But that's just one example of.
Let me take a moment as a point of reference and identity.
Okay.
So you were 9 years old. You were born in 1959. I was born in 1952. I'm 7 years older than you. So at that time, 1968, John Carlos, as you say, and Tommy Smith raised the black glove, had the black socks on, and the rest. We had that fall, I was on the football team at Gwynn Park High School in Southern Maryland, rural Southern Maryland. And before the game, when the national anthem was played, me and one other guy, Howard Matthews, I think maybe Lewis Martin did the same thing. He was the quarterback. But we pulled our socks up out of our normal socks and raised our fists. And I remember our coaches who had graduated from Glenville State College in West Virginia, white gentlemen, lost their whole mind. And that was a point of controversy for a while. One of the things happened to be, though, we were supporting them. There was something afoot to get the coaches not to get a raise or something. So we, as players, were supporting them. So we had to negotiate that. That 1968 moment is a seminal moment in our history, which I remember Brent Musburger.
Oh, yeah.
Brent Musburger
wrote an article.
Famous sports announcer, very, very popular.
Yeah.
Wrote an article castigating them and character assassinating them, which...
And has never apologized for that as far as I know.
Well, I remember a piece a couple of years ago that came out about his scathing article, critique against them, and the fact that he had not apologized. I don't know if he ever has or not, but what an incredible moment and what an incredible time. You're 9 years old. Take us your journey from there.
From there, well, the struggles continued. But again, I grew up in an incredibly supportive environment, not only in terms of my family, my extended family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and whatnot. Yeah. But there was, and still is, an incredibly strong African American community in Sacramento. And so I grew up down the street from Dr. Cornel West. His parents and my parents were very, very good friends. There were Tuskegee. I grew up around the black intelligentsia, I guess you'd say. Attorneys, physicians, Ph.D. My math tutor when I was young was Dr. Raymond Pitts, who had a Ph.D. from Michigan.
So let me ask you something. Because when we here on the East Coast, at least from where I sit, when we think about Sacramento, we don't think at all about strong black family. And do you know the genesis of, because again, you're talking late 50s, but for that community to have been developed and that strong at that point, folks had to move there much earlier. Do you know the genesis of that?
Let me just give you the genesis of it from my family's perspective. And that is the development of integration in California and the opening of the state government to employing African Americans and the power of the HBCU. Because what happened after World War II, and then we have the Great Migration West.
Yeah.
We have the Great Migration North.
Yeah.
We have the Great Migration West.
Right.
And my godfather, my Uncle Del, who had been stationed in California during either the Korean War or World War II, moved. He was the first one from our family, along with Pullman Porters, who
Went on to cross country.
I had a great uncle that in Berkeley that helped to establish an African American community of Pullman Porters in Berkeley, which is where my grandmother, he was my grandmother's brother. My grandmother wound up, he bought a house in Berkeley with his salary as a Pullman Porter, and my grandmother wound up moving into that house. So there was the Pullman Porter Avenue, and then there was the Great Migration West. And my father, when he finished Berkeley, he got a job my father was the part of the first group of African American parole officers in the state of California. So what my parents did and my mother was a charter faculty member at Cal State University, Sacramento. I think she got that position around 1962, 1963.
She's African American also.
Yes. And so she helped start the social work program at what is now Cal State Sacramento. It was Sacramento State University at the time. But my parents started calling their classmates from all over the country saying, there are jobs here with the state government in California. We can get you jobs.
Yeah.
And they did that, and their friends did that. And so from my family's perspective, that's one of the ways that our little community in South Sacramento developed through the telephone network and employment through the state of California.
I can only imagine that is a microcosm. Your family, others did that same thing.
Others did the same thing.
And grew that community.
Yes.
That's fascinating for that early on, for that community to grow like that, to be that strong on the West Coast, where you don't necessarily think where you don't think that kind of social consciousness exists as much. Now, it had to. It was that way in Oakland.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say. It was that way in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Los Angelinos, I think is how they're referred to, African Americans in Los Angeles, they're 2 or 3 generations removed from Texas. They're 2 and 3 generations removed from Arkansas. They're 2 and 3 generations removed from Oklahoma. Yeah. Because a lot of African Americans from that part of the country, they went to Los Angeles. And when you go to Oakland, you'll find they're 2 or 3 generations removed from Louisiana, from Mississippi. A lot of them went to.
So if we talk about your coming through junior high school and getting into high school, we now then would be talking about 66,
no,
60.
For me, I got to Christian Brothers. I got to Christian Brothers High School in 1973.
My math was all bad there. But what's your first recollection of the Black Panthers and Huey Newton?
Oh my goodness! My first recollection of the Panthers would be my oldest cousin, who I consider to be my brother, Ronnie, who is now 74, 75, in Oakland, because most of my family outside of my immediate family by that time had moved to Oakland. So I grew up, spent a lot of time in Oakland. And I just remember as a kid hanging out with my older cousins, and they would take me out and about into Brandy Park and into Arroyo Park and other neighborhoods in East Oakland, and I'd see the posters. I'd see the
Black Panther posters.
The Black Panther posters. I'd see the brothers and the sisters with the berets and the afros and the leather jackets and the whole thing. I didn't really process what that was all about in terms of the broader dynamic.
Yeah.
But what I did, I had a very strong sense of security, because I just got the sense of these folks were looking out for me. And I can't even tell you where that came from, other than just the watching my cousins interact. And if they told me it was all good, and if they told me we were cool, then it was all good and we were cool.
Man, do you know what a mouthful it is to hear that you're walking around, still as a youngster, 12, 13, 14 years old, and you're seeing what you see in terms of the posters and then, some of the guys or whatever, but that your sense was you were secure in that environment, and you juxtapose that with most of these cities today, where the last thing you hear
Is security.
is security. That speaks to a dynamic that I think we really need to study now.
It's funny you say that, because fairly recently I was talking to someone who is familiar with the neighborhoods in Oakland and the neighborhoods from that era. And I happened to mention, I said, oh, well, I spent a lot of time in Brandy Park. And they kind of, you?
Yeah.
Were in Brandy Park?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I was there all the time. And they said, man, you talk about a rough part of town. Yeah. And I said, I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as home. That's where my uncles and aunts lived, and that's where I played in the street, and that's where we rode our bikes up and down the street, and it was all good in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But Brandy Park, tough part of town.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in those teenage years now. You got a granddad, a great-granddad,
My grandfather.
grandfather that graduated from Howard University in 1911 as a dentist. And now you got to be starting to think about college. Was it stated? Was hey, you going to Howard, or did you have a choice in the matter?
I thought I did until I didn't. What did Amiri Baraka say? I didn't know about it till I knew about it.
Yeah.
A couple of things there. One, I remember I think I was in the 6th grade, and I came home with C's on my report card. And we're sitting at the dinner table, and my parents are not happy.
Yeah.
And so my father's saying, this is unacceptable. This is really a reflection of the fact that you're not applying yourself and all this kind of stuff. And so I said, why did I say this? I said, I don't understand why you guys are so upset. It says right here on the report card that C's are average. And average is okay.
In your logic at that time.
Rock, my mother grabbed me by she reached across the table and she grabbed me by my ear. And she pulled me upstairs. We had a little library across the hall from my room where their diplomas were.
Right.
And she points to the wall.
Yeah.
And she says, do you see that? It was her high school diploma. What does that say? And it said on her diploma that she graduated from the Negro School. And she slapped me in the back of my head. And she said, what does that mean? Pow! What does that mean? Pow!
Come on now.
Oh, man.
Mama do.
That's why I said early, it was beaten into me.
Yeah.
She said, you have to be 3 times as smart and work 4 times as hard to get half as far in America, because you are black in America. And you have to understand that. Pow! She hit me again. That's all I needed, man. We went downstairs, and by then my dad is sitting in the family room reading the paper, and I went in and sat down next to my father. He didn't put the paper down. He says, well, sounds like your mother handled that one. I don't think I need to say anything else.
My Lord.
And so now, from there, it's my junior year. I wanted to go to the University of San Diego.
Okay.
Because all of my buddies that were going to college, they were going to Southern California. Kenny went to Loyola. His brother Emerson went to Pepperdine. Mark went to UCLA. Dennis went to USC. His brother Donald went to USC. So I was going to Southern California. In my mind, I was going to go down to the University of San Diego, hopefully play baseball, hang out on the beach, and chase babes. That's what I was going to do. And but my folks said, no. You are going to an HBCU.
I love your mom and daddy. Even though she jap slapped you, I love your mom and daddy.
They said the friends that you make, and I was going to Hampton. My older sister was at Hampton. And Dr. L.B. Watt, my sister was at Southern as an undergrad when they had the shootings at Southern in 73, 74, something like that.
Yeah.
And so they closed the school and they sent everybody home. So my sister's at home, and Dr. L.B. Watts, who lived down the street from us, was a Hamptonian. And my folks were trying to figure out where they were going to send my sister. And so Dr. Watts, you may have heard of her husband, Dr. Lewis Watts.
Sure.
Next block, down the street from me.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Watts said, you need to send Valerie to Hampton. And so I got to Hampton because my older sister was at Hampton. And I had on my junior year, I had on a Hampton sweatshirt. And I'm at Christian Brothers High School. And I'm walking down the hall, and Mr. Patrick O'Brien, who was our guidance counselor, he stops me in the hall and he says, so Wilmer, I see you have on this Hampton Institute sweatshirt. I said, yeah, Mr. O'Brien, that's where I'm planning to go to college.
Yeah.
He said, you're going to college? I said, yeah. He said, Wilmer, have you ever thought about going to trade school? I said, no, Mr. O'Brien, I hadn't really thought about that. He said, well, why haven't you thought about going to trade school? I said, well, Mr. O'Brien, to tell you honestly, because I don't want to get the ass whooping I'm going to get if I go home and tell my parents I'm not going to college. I said, now, if you want to call my dad and if you want to have that conversation with my father, feel free. But I warn you, there'll be an ass whooping for it. In it for you as well. If you think you're going to call my dad and tell my dad something like that. I said, now,
go for it.
Do what you got to do. And
Yeah.
Now, I got two parents with master's degrees. I got a grandfather that was a dentist and a grandmother to graduate. In fact, my grandmother, I have a picture of her with Mary McLeod Bethune.
Wow.
She was part of the Black Teachers Union in New Orleans. And you're going to tell me that I shouldn't think, not to mention all the folks in my neighborhood that are Tuskegee. My mother's college roommate, my Aunt Pauline, lived around the corner from us in Sacramento, made her way over the years with my Uncle George, who was a Tuskegee Airman. So you're going to tell me? But that's an example of what our kids hear all the time. That's what our kids hear all the time. Lower the expectation. Why are you thinking about going to college? Well, because everybody in my household, everybody in my neighborhood, everybody who sits at our kitchen table.
But you know what, man? You talk about it makes me think about the tragedy of those who didn't have the foundation that you had. And when somebody older, an instructor, a guidance counselor, or whatever, drops that stuff on them who don't have the kind of foundation you had, what that does to the child, what that does to the spirit. And that is so interwoven into our history. It is tragic.
I was having trouble with math. I don't know, fourth, fifth. And then in high school, I was having trouble. I walked around the corner to Dr. Pitts' house. I told you, Dr. Pitts had his Ph.D. from Michigan. I think it was in physics. From Michigan. One of the first African Americans to get a Ph.D. from Michigan. I walked, and he also taught one of those that taught me how to play tennis. There were so many. Mr. Samuel Cullors, who lived directly across the street from us, had his master's degree in city planning from MIT. And when he moved in across the street from us, he had just come back from Bangkok, Thailand, where he had been instrumental in the 60s in redeveloping Bangkok, Thailand. I mean, the giants that one of Johnny Cochran's mentors, Nathaniel Colley, Mr. Colley, lived down the street from us. Very, very successful, prominent attorney went to Yale, taught himself how to read. He came off of a farm in Alabama, went to Tuskegee, and then from there went to Yale. I mean, the folks that, man, I would have had to have been a total idiot not to take advantage, avail myself just through osmosis. I would have had to have been a total idiot.
And now you're 3,000 miles from home at Hampton.
Yes.
Talk about Hampton, your time there.
Phenomenal.
Your influences.
Phenomenal. Mr. Novell Dickinson, chairman of the political science department at Hampton. He's still at Hampton as a assistant dean in arts and education. A phenomenal man. And he was the one that really, through being a political science major, gave me a worldview. Let me know that the world didn't revolve around Sacramento. The world didn't revolve around the United States. That the United States was merely a speck on the map and in a larger part of the world. The influence, after dedicating my book to my parents, I also dedicated that book to him, because that man then and to this day, my whole approach to the classroom is based upon how he approached us at Hampton.
Describe that.
Well, one of his lines was always, "I hope you've done your reading, for you will see this again." He's from Antigua or Antigua.
Reminds me of Richard Pryor joke. You will see this turkey. If you don't bring me a turkey or a goose, you will see this rabbit foot again.
But it was. I think it put very simply, I am here to teach you. You're not here to learn from me. And I'm here to teach you. And I present it that way because in my mind, what he's saying is, this is my responsibility to impart this to you. And
that's a calling. Yeah.
And I come from a line of teachers. My mother was a college professor. My sister is a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My maternal grandmother was a teacher. So my son, who is at Hampton now, going into his senior year, he's majoring in music education. He wants to be a teacher.
Okay.
And Mr. Dickinson's son, Omar Dickinson, is teaching my son. But so his approach was, I am here to teach you. So it was total access. There were no stupid questions. I'll sit here and explain this to you. Once I understand you've tried to read it, don't come in here with no questions if you haven't done your reading. Now, once you've done your reading, if you don't get it, I'll stay here with you till you do. that was his approach. And so that was always my approach, whether it was at Howard or whether it was at Morgan. I'm here for y'all. In fact, when I was at Morgan, they offered me the opportunity to teach online. And I said, no, I got to be in the classroom. I got.
And when you're saying when you were at Morgan, so you're at Hampton, you get your undergraduate.
Yes,
degree there.
I finished school and I got my Ph.D. from Howard, and so now I'm teaching at Howard. I taught at Howard for 13 years.
Okay.
And that ended, and then just a couple years ago, I got the opportunity to teach at Morgan. And they offered me the opportunity to teach online. But I said, no, I only know one way to do this. I gotta have my hands on my kids. Eye to eye, face to face. This whole thing, anyway. But so back to Hampton. Phenomenal experience. My parents told me that the friends that I made at Hampton would be the friends that I have for the rest of my life. No truer words could have ever been spoken. And some of the folks that I met day one are, I'm the godfather of their kids. My godson, Sidney, his dad I met day one. Greg lived across the hall from me. Sidney just graduated from the Air Force Academy.
Let me ask you, you say you taught at Howard for 13 years, then you went to Morgan to teach. So you got a...
There was a long break between that period, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
So as a teacher, instructor at Howard University, what was your greatest satisfaction of that experience?
One day I was part of a conference at the Cannon House office building on Capitol Hill. And for those that don't know, that's where the Congress, one of the buildings where the Congress members have their offices. I was there with Dr. Ronald Walters, part of a panel, because he was my mentor, and he's the reason that I got a PhD.
Yeah,
was because of him.
Walters, yeah.
But as
y'all don't know that name, Dr. Ron Walters, Google it.
As Amiri Baraka said one day at the March on Washington, he said, "Ron, why is it every bad boy I meet is one of your boys?"
Yeah, that's right.
That's not quite the way Amiri put it, but
yeah.
For TV, that's what it's got to be. So we finished the conference, and I'm walking to the elevator, and I hear somebody running down the hallway, and you know the echo in those hallways.
Sure.
Clop, 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 clop. She's running down, and then she yells out, Dr. Leon, as I'm heading to the elevator. And I turned around, it was one of my former students. And she said, I have to tell you, when I had your class in black politics, I thought you were out of your mind. You were just stone crazy. And now I see everything you said was absolutely right.
In the confines and in the hallway on Capitol Hill.
And she hugged me and she said, I am forever grateful.
Wow.
And when she said that, all I could think about, well, first of all, were my parents and Mr. Dickinson.
Yeah. What a moment.
Because
oh my God, what a moment,
that's
man.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So she says, I thought you at Howard, when I was at Howard University, in your class, you thought you were out of your mind. Okay, let's fast forward to today. I mean, we could sit here for a few hours and chop this up, but we only have an hour. So let's fast forward to today. I listen to your program on Sirius XM whenever I can. And I hear you. First of all, I encourage everybody to try to listen to Wilmer Leon.
You are very kind.
On a weekly basis, on Saturdays. It replays.
It replays, and I'm also on Radio Sputnik Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
You can go to Sputnik News and but from with my co-host Garland Nixon from 6 to 8 p.m.
Okay.
Monday through Friday.
All right. And when y'all hear the word Sputnik, and right away you probably think about Russia.
Right.
Now, out of your hearing, I've talked about some of the positions that I've heard you take. I'm going to say, let's just start here, because here's the core, here's the rub, as they say. The Ukraine war happened to start, the war between Ukraine and Russia, happened to start what the official date they say it was. I don't know exactly what was going on before, but the official date is February 24th, my birthday.
Okay.
So I always remember when that war started. I've always been confused about why the war started. You know what? I'll just stay there. I won't say how, but why the war started. I hear the stateside U.S. government explanation, which I always take with a grain of salt. After enduring all these years of sometimes bullshit propaganda, much too often bullshit propaganda. So I tried to study it, and I still don't have a full picture. I stumbled on your show one day while you were talking. You were right in the core of it. So I'm going to ask you to give me and my listeners here your analysis of what's going on, where our people in the United States, hard-earned tax dollars, are going in the billions, are going to Ukraine for supposedly their defense. And if it sounds like I might be getting a little fired up and heated about that, I am.
You should be.
Because in Africa, in the Sudan, where there are wars going on, and Lord knows there's a lot to be studied about that, and why the various factions in Sudan are killing each other. Oftentimes it is at the instigation of other foreign powers, but goddamn it, we're not spending money there like those people matter, like we say the people in Ukraine matters. What is the difference? In Ukraine, there is milky white, and in Sudan, you got the blackest of the black. You think that might have something to do with it? Well, I'm going to give the floor to you, brother. On that issue, and what the hell's going on with this war with Ukraine and Russia?
Well, I'll use the start date of the war as February 9th, 1990.
You're going to take it back.
Well, if you don't understand the history, you can't understand the present. It's analogous to looking at a puzzle that doesn't have all the pieces in it and thinking you understand the puzzle. In 1990, the Bush administration was trying to reunite or unify Germany, East and West Germany. The Soviets controlled East Germany. The West controlled West Germany. James Baker met with Mikhail Gorbachev.
James Baker, Secretary of State.
Met with Mikhail Gorbachev.
First George Bush.
Yes.
Yeah, George Bush won, yeah.
And told him, if you, among other things, if you agree to allow for the reunification of Germany, NATO will not move 1 inch further towards the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Gorbachev, and not only did Baker tell him that, George Bush told him that, Helmut Kohl, the Chancellor of Germany, told him that, Margaret Thatcher told him that, the Prime Minister of Britain, a whole lot of people. I'm trying to find anyway, who the
Those
president of France?
Yeah, I was going to say those Francois Mitterrand.
Mitterrand told him that. He says, okay, I'll agree. NATO doesn't move 1 inch closer towards my country.
You unify Germany, East and West, tear down that wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. That was Ronald Reagan.
That was Ronald Reagan. Right. Okay.
So, since then, the United States has lied and reneged on that promise. Now, some will say, well, it wasn't a treaty. It was only a statement. But you can look at the case, I think it's Greenland v. Norway, 1933 case, where the International Court decided statements made by government representatives are valid.
Okay.
So the fact that James Baker, as a representative of the United States, made an affirmative declaration to Mikhail Gorbachev, the then representative of the then Soviet Union, that is a binding commitment.
Okay.
In contracts, it's a verbal contract. Ever since James Baker made that commitment, the United States has done everything to dishonor it. So we go from then, I'll keep it simple because we got short time. You hear President Biden say all the time, we have to go into Ukraine to protect democracy. We have to go into Ukraine to protect sovereignty. Well, if that's true, Mr. President, why in 2014 did the United States overthrow the democratically elected government in Ukraine? Victoria is called the Maidan coup. Look it up, folks. The United States overthrew the Yanukovych government because Viktor Yanukovych was cutting some oil and gas deals with Russia, trying to save his economy. And the United States did not want Russia to have those agreements with Ukraine. So Victoria Nuland went in to Ukraine, worked with Nazis in Ukraine, the right sector and some other extreme far right, yes, Nazis in Ukraine, and overthrew the democratically elected government and installed, I can't remember who they installed. It might have been, I can't remember if it was Zelensky or not at that time. But anyway, from there, you now have these Nazis in West Ukraine ethnically cleansing what are known as ethnic Russians in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. And when I say ethnically cleansing, bombing them, shooting them, because these folks, these Nazis in the West, these Ukrainian Nazis, they're anti-Semitic. Well, they're Nazis. They're anti-Semitic. They're anti-black. They're Nazis, and they're Ukrainian nationalists, and so they don't consider those ethnic Russians in the East to be true Ukrainians. So they're being ethnically cleansed, and those ethnic Russians in the East are begging Putin to intervene. Please save us. And he's saying, that's not my fight. Nah, that's not my fight. But eventually they reach a peace agreement. Putin, Angela Merkel, from the Chancellor of Germany, she comes in and they negotiate what's called the Minsk agreements, which was supposed to be a peace agreement stopping the attack on the ethnic Russians, and that's supposed to bring an end to the conflict. Well, what we find out now, Yanukovych has admitted this, and Angela Merkel has admitted this. The Minsk agreement was a fraud. They never intended peace. It was only to buy time to allow a cessation of conflict, to buy time so that the Ukrainian army could be rearmed, could be reinforced, and could grow, because they always wanted to attack, the United States always wanted to attack Russia. This is not my opinion. This is historic fact.
Let me ask you a question. First of all, I know anybody with any political savvy and a little bit of education and common sense would know that the last 3 minutes of words that you just used, that folks would say you are anti-American and you are pro-Russia.
Right.
And you would respond how?
I am not a political operative. I am a political scientist. And what I have said to you is not my opinion. If it were, I would have said, in my opinion. It is historic fact. All I'm giving you is the truth.
Okay. So if
sometimes not all babies are pretty or cute.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got an ugly baby.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to say, hey, you know what, that baby ain't too pretty. This is an ugly baby situation.
Dr. Wilmer Leon, so if what you're saying is true,
And it is.
and if it is factual,
And it is.
then what this American society has been fed,
Is bullshit.
and the
Thank you, MSNBCIA. Thank you, CNN. Thank you, Rachel Maddow. Thank you, Joyanne Reed. Thank you, pick one. They're lying to you. They're lying to you.
has anyone
New York Times, Washington Post, they're lying to you.
have you ever had an opportunity to go on any of those programs?
Not to discuss this. There was a time when I wrote for the Griot. There was a time when I was on Lou Dobbs Tonight on CNN. There was a time when I was in negotiations with MSNBC to become a regular analyst and contributor for MSNBC. But as Dr. Walters said to me once when I asked him, hey, how come you don't have a TV show? And he said, because Wilmer, I've been offered more TV shows than I can remember, but every time I got ready to sign on the dotted line and the producers of the show realized I would not compromise my principles, the shows went away. And as a student of mine, don't you ever compromise. That's what he said to me. Mm-hmm. And when MSNBCIA figured out I'm not compromising. In fact, if I can quickly.
I'm going to take the time.
Okay. So, do you remember when this was Senator Obama was running for president? Mm-hmm. The NAACP commissioned a study trying to determine whether or not the Tea Party was racist. And the NAACP, the study, I can't remember who they...
I don't know why a study was needed for
that,
but nevertheless, go ahead.
So this report comes out, the Tea Party is racist. Mm-hmm. They bring me on MSNBC. I think, I could be wrong on this one, but I think it was Ari Melber, who at the time was doing the afternoon news on MSNBC. Okay. So he brings me on, and, Dr. Wilmer Leon, political scientist, blah, 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 blah. And so the NAACP has just released this report. Dr. Leon, don't you think the report is biased? No, Ari, why is it biased? Well, the NAACP, being a civil rights organization, commissioned I'm paraphrasing now, commissioned a report. Don't you think that the conclusion is biased? No, Ari, I read the report. The research methodology is in the report. The research methodology seems sound and solid. I read the whole thing. I think I read it 3 times. No, this seems to be good work here. And we know the Tea Party is racist. He tried probably 5 different times to get me to, he came at it all kind of ways. Tried to get me, he went from Southpaw, he went right, I mean, he came at me a whole lot of ways. And so finally I said, I got frustrated. I said, look, man, I'm the political scientist in this conversation, not you. I'm the one that took research methodologies, not you. I'm the one that had to write a Ph.D. dissertation, not you. And I'm telling you that this research is solid, the conclusion is valid, and the Tea Party is racist.
Okay. So
that was the last time I was on MSNBC.
I hear you.
That's why I told you that story.
So I take pride in having this platform.
As I take pride in mine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pride and responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility. Absolutely. To speak truth to power.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up here, and as has been as much as anything other than the orange guy who may be spending some time in jail in the future, maybe. The Ukraine war, the war in Ukraine, has flooded our news cycle as much as anything else. I bet you go back and do research and you will find as many minutes and as many hours talking about this war. And you would characterize the majority of what the government has said about what Joe Biden has said. Joe Biden's vice president is our sister Kamala Harris. So that would mean that to the extent that she has parroted the line, that your assessment would be their line is a lie, and they've been feeding the U.S. population and the world population bullshit.
Absolutely. Every day on a platter with a fork. Absolutely. Sauteed, flambéed, bullshit every day. Every day. Or every day, depending on how you want, where you're from. Look, man. Lockheed Martin. How much money has Lockheed Martin made from this? Raytheon. How much money has Raytheon made from this? And oh, by the way, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense,
Black man,
a fraternity brother of mine, on the board of Raytheon. This is nothing but a money laundering scheme. It's a money.
When you say this, I would like for you to use the word.
The war in Ukraine. It's a proxy war. This is not Russia fighting Ukraine. The Ukraine is the pawn on the chessboard in the fight between the United States and Russia. There are people in the Biden administration, and it's really not even administration specific. There are people in the elite in this country that have been trained by her name's dad on Morning Joe.
Brzezinski.
Brezhnev Brzezinski, who was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. He was staunch anti-Russia. And he trained Madeleine Albright. He trained Hillary Clinton. Many believe is the one that discovered Barack Obama because he taught Barack Obama at Columbia.
Right.
They have been indoctrinated into believing that Russia is our mortal enemy. Then you've got some in government that believe that China is the mortal enemy. And the way that you get to China is you got to eliminate Russia. So there's some conflicts there, but that's what this is about.
Let me ask you. We had an Egyptian political scientist do one of my shows. I don't even know if he said it on air, but I know he said it to me privately. That Egypt, you just mentioned proxy war, that Israel was simply a hornet's nest for what the U.S. government wanted to do into the rest of the region. It served.
It was an aircraft. Some refer to it as an aircraft carrier in the region.
It served to handle the mischief of the U.S. government. Would you equate Ukraine with serving the interests, is there to in part serve the interests for Russia and further?
Joe Biden just said, and folks, I am quoting, these are the, I'm again, not my opinion.
Yeah.
This is Joe Biden just said last week. Ukraine, he wants to start providing the similar type of funding to Ukraine that the United States gives Israel every year, which is almost $3.8 billion a year is what the United States gives to Israel. Joe Biden just said last week that he wants Ukraine now to follow that model. So if that doesn't answer your question, and again, I'm not making this up. If y'all want to try and put a bullet in my head when I step out of here for saying it, fine. But I'm telling you the truth. Joe Biden said it. I didn't make it up.
Yeah. Folks, I very much want to thank you for joining us here today.
I'm sorry if I got a little...
Oh, no. It's all good, brother. It's all good. I want my audience to know that to the absolute best of our abilities, we will try to deliver you the unvarnished, raw truth. And if that truth has to be spoken to power, if that truth embarrasses power, if that truth takes down a notch your Yankee Doodle dandy reverence for this government. I started to say corrupt government, but I didn't say it because that's for you to decide. I have my absolute opinion about it as somebody that now has exceeded that 70-year-old mark and has tried to understand how the times we're living in and the history that we have endured. Dr. Wilmer Leon, I am going to ask you in a most sincere manner to come back because there is going to be more to talk about. Folks, we don't just limit ourselves to a few things that's going on here in the United States. We talk about reparations. We are serious about that, but we're serious about understanding the truth of the world also. And folks like Dr. Wilmer Leon can help us with that understanding. You're about to say?
Malcolm, I believe this was attributed to Malcolm. If my telling you the truth makes you uncomfortable or makes you unhappy, don't get mad at me. Get mad at the truth.
Get mad at what the truth is. Thank you, brother, for joining us today. My man, thank you again. All right. That wraps us up, folks. Subscribe, please, like the page, and spread the news of the Rock Newman Show 2.0.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.